Good afternoon and welcome to the information session for the Winemaking Certificate Program here at UC Davis, Division of Continuing and Professional Education. My name is Grady Wan and I'll be your host today, and we're going to hopefully answer most of your questions having to do with the Winemaking Certificate Program here at UCD. Again, just welcome. Glad to have you with us. And I can get okay, well, joining me today is Katie Candola, who's the program administrator for the Winemaking Certificate team. And as I mentioned, my name is Grady Wan. I'm the program director, and I also am an instructor in the program, teaching 3 of the 5 courses. My background is primarily in chemistry by training, but then I spent 25 years as a commercial winemaker before joining the program about 10 years ago. So just a little bit of logistics about what we're going to be doing today. My plan is to do a brief introduction with some industry trends, and then we're going to talk about the certificate program, who it's aimed at and what its focus is, and then talk about the individual certificate courses and the course logistics for the program. We'll have a couple of comments about making the program work for you, and then toward the end we'll have some time for question and answers. If you do have a question during the presentation, feel free to click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type in a question, and Katie will collect these and ask them at the end of the session if they're not easy to handle immediately. Just a couple of comments about our industry in general. More wineries open every year. This is brought quickly to mind as I drive through Napa and Sonoma these days, as I run into new winery names that I haven't seen before. But now there are over 10,000 wineries in the United States. We're seeing about a 5% annual growth in the number of wineries each year. So only 2 years ago, it was about 9,000 wineries. There are wineries in all 50 states these days, and there are certain areas seeing higher growth of the wine industry, including Ohio and Pennsylvania, New York and Virginia, to name a couple. But it is interesting that all 50 states, even Hawaii and Alaska, have wineries these days. There's certainly some activity in California with regard to consolidation of wineries, as larger conglomerates are buying up smaller wineries all the time. But the job market continues to be relatively tight. It's difficult to find qualified potential employees these days, and so jobs are definitely at a premium. There may also be more opportunities in other states than California as new wine growing regions and new wineries open there. Just a quick question for you, if you're willing to if you could tell us a little bit about the where you are located, that would be great. Let's see, okay, the poll should be visible now. If you want to click on one of those and tell us where you're located today, whether that's in California or other parts of the United States, or in Canada, where we have a good presence in British Columbia and the Okanagan Valley, and other countries as well. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to click in. See, we've gotten a number of responses. So just another couple of seconds if you want to get your comment in. Okay, I'm going to close that. So as you can see, we've got a broad spectrum of folks here today, primarily from California, which is typical of our program, but also in the Northwest, but as you can see, across the United States and even internationally. Okay, let me click that away. And here's a list of the states in the United States and the number of wineries that are present there. As you can see, California dominates the scene with 4,500 wineries at the end of 2018. But we have wineries almost everywhere, including 7, which was a big surprise to me, in Alaska. One other thing that this points out is that there's a second column there labeled as virtual wineries. And as you can see, some states have a tremendously large number of virtual wineries. Now, virtual wineries are wineries that do have a physical location, but they don't have their own bonded premises. So they're sharing a bonded premises with either a custom crush facility or another winery where they're making wines. This has become a big trend in the industry because it saves on equipment costs. And so you have a place to make your wine, but you don't necessarily have to buy all the equipment. It's especially true for grape processing equipment, which is only used for a couple of weeks out of the year and ends up being a big capital expense. So this just lists the top wineries in the US by size. And you may notice that a few of them are larger conglomerates, but E&J Gallo continues to be the largest winery in our country, but you can see the list going down there. I put this up mainly because even though there's 10,000 wineries now in the United States, the top 50 account for a lot more than 90% of the production. In fact, it's closer to 95%. So this chart shows the number of US wineries by size, and this kind of emphasizes the point. The chart on the left shows that basically 96% of the wineries in the United States are classified as small, that is less than 50,000 cases, and a full 80% of them are below 5,000 cases annually. So these are quite small wineries that make up the bulk of that number. There's also a little chart on the right that shows you the average bottle price. Not too many wineries operating in the really low price range. They tend to be the larger wineries and account for a lot of the volume. But the primary region of bottle pricing in our industry is in that mid-range, $11 to $60. I threw this in, although it may not be particularly relevant to our discussion today, but I was interested in the 5 most popular wine varieties in the United States at the end of 2018. And not surprisingly, Chardonnay and Cabernet dominate the scene here, with Chardonnay outselling Cabernet in volume. But this was the first year that Cabernet has slipped past Chardonnay as far as sales dollars are concerned. I think in the next couple of years, we'll see Cabernet pass Chardonnay in volume as well. But at this point, they are the top 2 by far. An interesting point on this chart is the number 3 varietal is Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris. And it is quite a bit larger than the next leading variety, Pinot Noir. So a little bit of a surprise to me that Pinot Grigio was the 3rd most sold variety in our country, but nonetheless, those are the facts. So we're going to talk a little bit about the winemaking certificate program now. I had a question for another question for you guys, if you're willing to answer it, having to do with your motivation for the being here today. So if you want to click in just whether or not you're currently in wine production and looking to advance, whether you're currently in another area of the wine industry and looking to better understand production, whether you own a vineyard thinking about starting a winery, or just a home winemaker thinking about expanding production, or just curious. So if you want to take a couple of seconds and look through that. Most of us that got into the wine business did so not so much for the money, but more for the interest in the product first, I would say, and then perhaps lifestyle or life location as a secondary factor. But nonetheless, it is a great industry to be a part of, and we're happy that you're here today to look at some of the aspects of the winemaking certificate program. I'm going to share the results here. Interesting that the largest number were planning to own a vineyard or a winery sometime in the future. This is not uncommon for our students. Oftentimes we have students that are second career folks looking to either purchase a vineyard or start a winery in their next phase of life. So it's that's not uncommon. Second most is probably people that are in wine production and looking for more technical knowledge. But obviously in this case, we've also got a lot of wine enthusiasts that just want to learn more about production winemaking. Okay, let me get out of there. Well, as I mentioned, most of us did not get in the business in order to make money, and that's actually a good thing. But nonetheless, people are interested in what typical salaries are for wineries. I put up this table having to do with average base salaries for wineries producing fewer than 50,000 annual cases, because that's where most of us will be involved in the industry. For the larger wineries, it usually takes several steps to get up to these higher level roles. But nonetheless, you can see that the winemaker is typically the highest paid of the salary slots in a relatively small winery. And not surprisingly, the average salaries increase with winery size. So those are some of the main occupations in the wine industry. But then if we look a little closer at the average salaries for other production workers in the wine industry, these are often either entry-level positions or mid-level positions in the winery. You can see that they range from the assistant winemaker, average salary of about $70,000, and then down to about $42,000 for a cellar worker. As I mentioned, salaries are generally higher for larger wineries and for other roles in the wine industry as well. So I want to talk now about the winemaking certificate program itself. Our goal here at UC Davis CPE is to help you learn the science behind the art of winemaking. Our program is really designed for those that are interested in production winemaking, so not really other business aspects or sales aspects or direct marketing sides of the wine industry, but for those that are interested in learning more about and becoming a part of production winemaking. That being said, the program may be useful to basically any person that's in the wine industry or wants to be, that is intrigued by the science of winemaking. And I've always encouraged the people that work for me in sales and marketing to have worked a little bit in production, because it really helps you understand the process and understands the product better. So just a couple of benefits to the certificate program. Obviously, you can pursue your passion for winemaking. That's where most of our students get started, interest in wine and winemaking and wanting to learn more about it. The certificate program does provide academic and technical background on the winemaking processes, and especially understanding the chemical and microbiological processes involved with winemaking. We believe that knowing the science behind the winemaking process will help you make better winemaking decisions when you get in a position to be able to do so. You also learn the factors involved in growing quality wine grapes, which is obviously a critical part of the winemaking process, and also possibility of using new technical knowledge to advance your winemaking career. We find a number of our students that are already working in the business in the cellar or some other aspect of the wine business, and learning this information helps them move up in their career path. A couple of features about the program. It's based on the UC Davis Viticulture and Enology science-based curriculum here at Davis, and this program has been world-renowned for its research and science in this area. The program hires quality instructors with extensive commercial winemaking experience. The instructors that I get involved in this program tend to have upwards of 20 years or more as commercial winemakers or involved in the industry. And it's that practical application of the academic information that is important to the instructors, and we have found is extremely important to our students. Obviously, this is an online program, and all the courses are carried 100% on a web-based platform. There's a flexible course path to allow you to have some flexibility in the order and the timing in which you take these courses. And of course, whenever you get a chance to network with instructors with a vast experience, as well as fellow students working in the wine business all across the country and the world, it improves your network of information. A couple of comments about the program's results. We have had a number of graduates go directly into winemaking positions. However, I should caution you that this is not the normal route for our students when they complete the program. Students that end up as a winemaker immediately out of the program are usually already connected to a family winery. That is, they are taking it to be able to take on the winemaker role in their family operation, or they're starting their own winery operation. That is probably the most common, and also those opportunities are more prevalent in areas outside of California, especially in Napa and Sonoma. Other graduates in the industry, if they're working in the industry already, tend to advance faster than they otherwise would with this sort of background. And graduates that are from outside the industry looking to be involved in the wine industry in the future usually must start with some sort of production job and work their way up. You do have the advantage of having the knowledge that should allow that career path to move more quickly, but in the end, winemaking is an experiential occupation, and nothing takes the place of the experience of working in a winery cellar and making wines hands-on. A couple of comments about the courses themselves. The program consists of 5 quarter-long courses that are 10 or 11 weeks long. Generally, the program takes about 18 to 24 months to complete, although it can be longer. It depends on the individual student's availability and the urgency with which they want to complete the program. Not all courses are available every quarter, and not all students want to take the courses that are available that quarter. So it does sometimes take a little bit longer than working directly through 5 or 6 quarters in the program. The cost, the introductory class is listed here at $685. Remaining 4 classes are $2,000 each. There's a certificate fee, and the total cost a little under $9,000 total. You can also take the introductory course separately. It is an open enrollment course. It serves as the prelude to our program, but can be taken outside of the program as well. So here's a list of our 5 courses. As I mentioned, the Introduction to Wine and Winemaking is the first course, an open enrollment course. And then there are 4 what we consider upper level courses that are the main part of the certificate program. They include a wine production course, quality control and analysis that includes microbiology as well, a viticulture for winemakers course, and a wine stability and sensory analysis course. There's a couple of comments about the courses themselves. They are administered, as I mentioned, 100% online. Access to the website is at your convenience. The intro course is open enrollment, but the rest of the courses are limited to 40 students so that we can try to optimize the student to instructor interaction, and also the student to student. The peer-to-peer interaction is extremely rich in these environments because we have students from literally all over the world with a vast array of experience that can weigh in on many topics. The courses are 10 or 11 weeks long. They have weekly lessons and assignments, both reading assignments, discussion assignments, and written assignments. All course materials are available through the website. The lectures are recorded voice-over PowerPoint lectures. Textbook readings are included, other downloadable reading materials, and access to assigned articles from our technical journal, the American Journal of Enology and Viticulture. Also, there are live video chat sessions, at least after the intro course. The remaining 4 courses have live video chat sessions with the instructors for live interaction. You can apply to the certificate program. You must apply before registering for the first upper level course, the wine production course. As I mentioned, you can take the Introduction to Wine and Winemaking without applying to the certificate program. There is a requirement of 1 semester of college chemistry before you can take the wine production course, and more about that in a minute. Usually the wine production course has a short 3 to 6 month wait list to getting in. As I mentioned, that course is limited to 40 students per quarter and generally runs 3 quarters out of the year. The last 3 classes, quality control, viticulture, and wine stability, can be taken in any order depending on your interest and availability. And Katie, our program administrator, will work with you to design the program that works for you individually. As far as the chemistry prerequisite is concerned, the program does require some level of understanding of general biological and organic chemistry. For those that haven't had a sufficient science background, there are several options. As I mentioned, we require a 1 semester college chemistry course as a prerequisite. And you have several options for fulfilling that requirement. There's a local community college option. There are usually chemistry courses available through your local community college. We would recommend usually the chemistry that's geared toward the health sciences majors. because it gives a good introduction to the biological side as well as the general chemistry side. There's also an online option that we have designed that you can get more information about, but there's also a new opportunity that should be available by January of 2020. I'm in the process of designing a chemistry course that's specifically designed for or as a prerequisite for our program, and as such will be a great opportunity and a great way to fulfill the chemistry prerequisite. This new course, as I said, is set to be available January of next year. It is a basic general biological and organic chemistry course with a winemaking emphasis. It is not a wine chemistry course per se. It's a basic chemistry course that will also give you an introduction to organic and biochemistry, because those areas are also of interest to us as winemakers. It's being designed as a 12-week online course specifically for this program and based on the Karen Timberlake text, General Organic and Biological Chemistry Structures of Life, which was the new edition, was just published this year by Pearson. So be on the lookout for this. Contact Katie if you have an interest in this program. As I said, should be available beginning winter quarter in 2020. The intro course is the first one that I want to talk about specifically. As I mentioned, it's an open enrollment course, generally offered all 4 quarters. It's the student interaction is limited to email access to the instructors, but that is available to you at any time, where you can ask questions of the material and get answers specifically to your questions. The resources are animated recorded lectures by UC Davis professors, and the assessments are carried out via a midterm and final, which are both timed closed book multiple choice type tests. Here are some of the topics that are included in the introductory class. This is an 11-week class. It looks at the history of wine. The second half of the course basically takes a world tour of the major wine growing regions around the world, talks about the wines that are important to each of those wine regions. You'll learn about the fundamentals of the winemaking process. You'll be introduced to wine and health issues, the way to interpret a wine label, and basic wine tasting techniques. As I mentioned, the remaining 4 courses in the program after the introductory program are quite different and take quite a bit more work. These are limited to 40 student maximums, and the resources are also recorded lectures, readings from the text, and the technical journals. You'll also have student interaction with email access to instructors, threaded discussion forums throughout the class, some general ones as well as specific learning topics, and as I mentioned, live webinar sessions with the instructor for Q&A and practical winemaking tips. The assessments in these cases are case study, open book types of assignments that take research and a lot of thought, and generally there's at least 5 of these taking place every other week basically throughout the course, and you will get individual feedback provided by the instructor during as a result of these assignments. Topics in the first of these 4 courses, the wine production course. We talk about the influence of grape composition and ripening on the harvest decision and wine style. We look at grape and wine processing over a couple of weeks and any additions or adjustments that might need to be made there. We talk about at length about alcoholic fermentation, the yeast interaction with sugar converting to alcohol, with an emphasis on fermentation management. And so a large part of this course is looking at fermentation management, both the yeast primary fermentation and the malolactic bacterial secondary fermentation as well. The last couple of weeks of the course are dedicated to general cellar operations and wine stability, and looking all the way through to bottling, but some of these topics are covered in more detail in later courses. The quality control and analysis and microbiological course looks at the scientific method and dimensional analysis, also looks at laboratory design, talk a lot about the microorganisms that are present in wines and winemaking and wine spoilage, and look at techniques and controls to keep those bugs in check. And then we talk about basic quality control analysis theory, technique, and application, looking at most of the major analytical parameters and how they are measured and why they are important to winemaking. The Viticulture for Winemakers course is a course that looks at the science of quality grape growing. This often is an area that is ignored by winemakers in their training, and I can speak from experience that oftentimes you will be put in a position where you may not manage the vineyards on a day-to-day basis, but you are responsible for the grape quality that comes out of those vineyards. And so having knowledge of how quality wine grapes are grown and the parameters that are important to quality wine grapes is of the utmost importance, I think. And so we have a class that's dedicated to the science of viticulture. You look at the importance of quality plant material, soils and cover crops, grapevines, viruses, diseases, and pests. Obviously, canopy control, pruning, water relations and irrigation, nutrition and vine balance, as well as vineyard development considerations. In fact, in this course, you will be asked to develop a vineyard from starting plot through to planting and all the decisions that go into that. The final course in this sequence is wine stability and sensory analysis, and it's mainly geared at the finishing operations for the winemaking process. We do talk about sensory physiology and sensory analytical testing methods, but then we address everything from clarification, fining, and filtration through all manner of stabilities, potassium acid tartrate, protein stability, color stability, looking at volatile sulfur compounds and their remediation, as well as oak barrel aging and microbiological stability and bottling considerations. So in the end, our hope is that the winemaking certificate program will help you learn about world wine production and appreciation, the important factors that are present in the growing of quality wine grapes, and give you a systematic and scientific approach to winemaking or purchasing decisions. And along the way, we'll address sensory analysis, major faults, and ways to rectify such problems, as well as the fundamental principles of analytical chemistry and microbiology. In the end, our goal is to help you learn the science behind the winemaking process and end up helping you make better winemaking decisions. So that's the end of my prepared comments, and I would like to try to answer some of the questions that may have come in. So I'm going to turn to Katie, and we'll see if we can get some of your questions answered.
Hello, I'm Katie Candola. One of the questions that came in asked about the salary for assistant winemaker. I suppose we covered that in the chart you displayed, Grady?
I did. The average across the United States for wineries under 50,000 cases was about $70,000. That probably runs the gamut because you'll find in extremely small winery settings where maybe there's a winemaker and one other person, that person could be called a cellar worker, a cellar master, or assistant winemaker. And as a result, they may be included in this average. But in general, what we're talking about with assistant winemaker is somebody that has some management control over cellar workers and some involvement in the decision-making process, and as such is kind of a right-hand man to the, or woman to the winemaker. And those salaries are much higher than the cellar worker average, which is in the low 40,000 range.
Thank you. Another question, Grady. Does the UC Davis graduate program cover much beyond the certificate course or courses?
Does the UC Davis graduate program?
Yes.
So the on-campus program?
Yes.
The graduate program has some advanced graduate courses that are taken, as well as involvement in research, which is the primary function of a graduate student. In, say, the master's program, they would be doing research on one of the projects for one of the major professors, in addition to taking coursework. So we try to include the material from the undergraduate program and any new information that is being introduced into the wine industry through our instructors.
Okay, another question. One of the students wants to know if there are other courses available that will go more in depth with the actual vineyards, or which courses do you recommend that I take?
There are a number of short courses that are offered through UC Davis CPE, so that's our continuing and professional education arm. These courses are often either weekend courses, one-day courses that are offered at the Davis campus. So if you have access to Davis, you should check the listings. There are courses available for both vineyard side and the winemaking side that are offered periodically. And if you contact Katie, she should be able to direct you. They're also available on the website.
Okay, another question regarding chemistry. How can I assess if I've got sufficient science background to benefit from the intro class?
We do have on our winemaking certificate website, we do have some chemistry sample questions that you can look at to see if you're comfortable with those. Basically, if you've had any college chemistry in the past, you probably have had enough of an introduction to enter the program. If you need to have a refresher, as I mentioned, the local community college is usually a great resource, and we do have a new course coming up next year that is geared in the specific direction of the winemaking certificate program. A lot of times we have students that may have taken college chemistry many, many years ago, and they really would benefit from a refresher. And as I mentioned, community college program, especially the health sciences type of chemistry program, is usually best because that will get a little bit of introduction into the organic and biochemistry that would help with the program as well.
Another common question is that they've taken WSET levels 1, 2, or 3. Do they need to take the introduction course?
The introduction course can be waived by just have to fill out a request when you apply to the program, and Katie and I will review those and look at the background for each individual student and decide whether or not we feel that the intro course can be waived. Usually with enough practical experience in the wine industry and or an introduction to the world winemaking regions is sufficient.
To piggyback that question, this individual is asking if, okay, I have 2 engineering degrees. My undergraduate degree included chemistry, but not organic chemistry. Is that sufficient?
That will probably be sufficient. We often run into students that don't have organic chemistry or biochemistry in their background, and we have chosen not to require those type of courses for the program. If you have a science background and general chemistry, we can generally get you up to speed on the biochemistry side of things during the coursework.
Okay, another question regarding chemistry.
I like chemistry questions because that's my background.
I took 2 years of second semester organic chemistry in 1976. Will that suffice?
That goes back to when I was taking organic chemistry as well. As long as yes, that will suffice. And I would say that you're probably someone that has enough of a science background that you retained enough of it. You might want to just kind of review a couple of those topics and look at the sample questions just to make sure that you're comfortable with them. But my guess would be probably yes.
Okay, another question. My intention is to learn from the US and implement the knowledge in Europe, Portugal. Your thoughts, please.
I think that's a great idea. A lot of what we promote here in the program is California-centric, in the sense that most of my instructors have worked primarily in the California wine industry, primarily with the prominent vinifera grapes. But most of us have had enough experience with some of the hybrids to give practical information to the rest of the United States. But if you're moving into Portugal, my guess is that it'll be directly translatable. And since most of those are vinifera varieties, although some of them are extremely obscure as far as the individual varieties.
Regarding the chemistry course that we are proposing for winter of 2020, it appears that we have a lot of interest in that, and one of the students is asking the cost of the course, and another student asking about the textbook for that course.
Okay, the costs have not been exactly set yet, but the text has been. And the cost, which looks like it's going to run in the $500 or $600 range, will include the e-text and all the online resources that Pearson makes available for that text. So there'd be no additional costs to the students. And we will finalize that once we have, I'm still in the process of recording the lectures and designing the assessments for that class. So we haven't made the final decision on the exact cost, but that gives you just a ballpark.
Thank you, Grady. Another question. Are there any practical application requirements throughout the certificate programs, such as requirement to actually visit a winery?
There are no additional requirements. There are some opportunities that arise through the courses. Generally, our vineyard and viticulture instructors will hold a session at the UC Davis Oakville Station, experimental station in Napa for those that can make it. And depending upon the time of year, might be looking at pruning a vineyard or canopy management. And so it's not required because we have students from too far away to require their attendance, but it does, it is an option for people that are close enough by. Often the other wine production courses will coordinate a meeting in one of the wine producing areas where a number of the students will get together at a particular winery and go through a tour and tasting in that setting to meet each other in person, which is always nice, or just to network. So those opportunities do exist, but they are not requirements.
Thanks. Another question. I have a viticulture certificate. Would I be required to take the viticulture course, or would prior learning credit be given?
We would have to take a look at everything is individually assessed. So when you applied to the program, you would just let Katie know, and we would review that and speak with our viticulture instructor, and that's certainly a possibility. There's always the possibility to waive one of the courses during the certificate program, but we tend not to want to waive the upper four courses, but that may be an exception.
Okay, next question. Do your graduates find that their knowledge is sufficient upon completion of the certificate to apply for internships or entry-level positions, or do they typically transition into more advanced degrees?
Generally, I mean, the information in the certificate program is certainly sufficient for an internship, not just a harvest internship, but a entry-level position at most wineries. And so that is always a possibility. And as far as higher level opportunities, it depends on the individual winery, but I would say the answer to the question was yes, the program certainly will provide the information necessary for entry-level positions.
Another question regarding the chemistry course that we are proposing. The student wants to know if there will be a cap on the number of students per class for the new chem class.
I'm not sure exactly how to answer that because we haven't really assessed the demand for the class at this point. I'm trying to design it so that it will provide a tremendous amount of feedback to the students, and we should be able to handle more than the 40 students that we use in the upper level classes. So I don't expect it to be impacted, and we expect to be able to offer it at least a couple times a year. So I don't expect it's going to be a problem in that case, but as I said, we're in the development stage, so I can't really speak specifically to what limitations there might be in the future.
Okay, how many hours per week should a student expect to spend on lessons and assignments for these classes?
Well, I would say the introductory course doesn't take nearly as much time as the other four courses. A couple of hours a week probably is sufficient for the introductory course. And usually there's about hour and a half or 2 hours of lectures to review, and that's pretty much it for the introductory course. The other courses, the students have told me that they spend anywhere in the 12 to 15 hours a week on their studies for the course. Some spend longer. It depends on how much you want to get out of the course. The courses are designed with a tremendous amount of information, but it really is up to the individual student how much they want to wring out of the program. And the more engaged you are, the more active you are with interaction with other students and with the instructor, the more information you can glean. But I would say 10 to 15 hours probably is what I've heard as the average.
Thank you, Brady. How do I become a winemaker? Can you describe the normal path or the steps?
Well, it depends a little bit on your background and how you got into it. I mean, I can describe my path. fairly easily. I was in graduate school at Stanford when I was finishing my PhD, and came to learn that I really wasn't, I didn't really want to be an industrial research chemist, which was kind of what I was being trained for, and figured I'd end up teaching college chemistry, but decided I'd take a brief hiatus and go up and work a harvest in northern Sonoma County. So I hired on as a temporary harvest worker at a small winery in northern Sonoma County, and worked that first harvest. Found that I was interested enough in it to pursue some extension classes at UC Davis, which I did in between harvests. Came back and worked a second harvest as an assistant winemaker at the same winery. And then from there, got a job on the winemaking staff at Sonoma-Cutrer Vineyards in the Russian River, making high-end Chardonnay, job I spent 6 years at, and then was hired as the winemaker at Quivira Vineyards in Dry Creek Valley, where I served as winemaker and managing partner for 17 years before we sold it. So I think that's a fairly normal path. That is, people that are interested in winemaking, they take a entry-level position in production, usually as a cellar worker, and then advance from there depending upon their background and their interest and the opportunities that are given to them. As I mentioned, winemaking is an experiential thing. We can learn the science about it, but nobody wants to give you the reins of a winery until you actually have practical experience under your belt. So in almost all cases, you would need to get some practical experience. One of the things that are the current students have the advantage that I didn't have when I was getting into the business some 35 years ago is the opportunity to work several harvests in the same year. We have a number of our students that take a harvest position here in California, and then will work in the Southern Hemisphere, either in South America or in New Zealand or Australia the following spring for us, where their harvest takes place in March, and then come back and work a third harvest, essentially 3 harvests in 18 months. And you can gain a tremendous amount of experience doing that. And also you can get experience that's diversified. You can learn from different winemakers in different settings, and it's extremely valuable. So that's a good way to jumpstart your career, especially if you're young. Those that are in the older generation, more experienced workers, like myself, generally they get into the wine business by purchasing a small vineyard and deciding to make wine from it, or deciding to make start a small virtual winery where you're using the facilities of another winery and beginning to make wine on a production level in that setting. So hopefully that helps. It's extremely individual, depends on the area that you're in and your background and the opportunities that happen to come your way. But I can tell you, it's a wonderful industry to be a part of. It's great to be working in the wine country, and the winemaker's role tends to be never boring. It's a combination of agriculture, production, actually making something with your hands. There's some science in it. There's some promotion, because you'll probably be involved in promoting your products either in the local market or in the national market. And most of us as winemakers, you tend to take on more management responsibilities as your career advances. And so, say for me, I wasn't trained to be in finance or employee management, but that's the role that you end up with as you become winemaker and general manager, which is often the case in smaller wineries. So a fascinating profession, a great industry to be involved in. And what's really nice is that although there may be some high-level competition between the large winery marketing folks, the small winery production industry is an industry that shares resources and information very freely, and it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of. It's great to see new wine growing areas popping up all over the place. I have family in Virginia, and to see all the wineries in the western part of the Virginia state is great. We have a daughter and granddaughter in Colorado, and now there's some 70 wineries in Colorado, a lot of them in the Grand Junction area. And there's just wineries popping up all over the place. So no matter where you are, it's a place you can get involved.
Thank you, Grady. I think we basically covered all the questions.
Well, that's great. If that's the case, I want to thank you for your attendance today.